The next thing we have is our Mr. Attorney. Update on opioid epidemic.
Yeah, y'all don't bill us for the entertainment value for the last 3 hours, guys. There's as I've discovered in the last few weeks, there's an opioid epidemic, specifically, as I understand it, prescription narcotic painkillers. We're hearing that Panhandle, Florida is characterized as the Appalachian Mountains of the coast in regard to levels of poverty and the effect of the opioid epidemic. Problems relating to health care, service cost increase to governments, county governments, city governments of the state. And so, as I understand it, and we have 2 law firms here to present for us, it's a huge problem, huge numbers, huge related expenses, and there's big litigation going on in several states. Across the states, it will be federal litigation that may turn into multi-district litigation in federal court. We have Perry and Young from Panama City and Associated Counsel. We have Bryant and Higby from Panama City and their Associated Counsel. Come up and give very short presentations to the board and let y'all get to know them a little bit and understand the problem better. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Larry Perry and his associates from out of town.
This is a great way to make sure that attorneys keep a short presentation and run it right on into lunchtime. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for passing out a presentation that we have for you. I understand you've received other presentations today. You'll probably receive one more from the other associated law firms. I'm here on behalf of Perry and Young, and specifically my law partner, Chris Young. He, is from up here around this area. He could not be here today due to a prior engagement, but I just want to talk with you for about 5 minutes, probably even less than that. If you know somebody that is diabetic, if you know somebody that has hypertension, then the odds are that you know somebody or you have somebody in your family or your immediate circle of friends who has prescription opioids. Washington County is the #1 county in the state of Florida per capita for opioid prescriptions. It's estimated by the Florida Department of Health that 1.24 opioid prescriptions are here in the state of here in Washington County alone per capita. So that's for every adult over the age of 18. You've already heard some of the things that go on with county services: overdoses, county diversion programs, first responders, county jail, EMS, police force, drug court, jails, Marchman Act, Baker Acts, and then you find yourself with these added expenditures. Law enforcement and social services alone in 2017 for Washington County has asked for an approximately $750,000 just to combat and handle this. Law enforcement asked specifically for training, overtime, jail cost. Sheriff Cruz talked about the number of arrests that have occurred this year alone. And this just doesn't happen overnight, and that's why we're here. What makes this crisis any different than any other drug or alcohol? Number one, opioid prescription addiction occurs very short. It's a relatively short time period. It's permanent if it's left solely to willpower. It's illegal because the prescriptions come from an authorized doctor. A lot of them are exchanged on the streets a variety of different ways, and that creates a whole separate set of problems. But as Sheriff Cruz pointed out, there is no absolute way that you can arrest your way out of this problem. We're here today to kind of give you a little bit of our background. I have with me my Associated Counsel, Ansley Garrett. Ansley's from Birmingham, Alabama. Ansley and I have worked together for nearly 30 years in cases. We started out in the same law firm in Alabama, and Ansley has served in leadership roles in the multi-district litigation that Mr. Carter alluded to. So what happens and what's important here for Washington County? What we are asking is that you would retain our law firms. We work on a contingency fee, meaning there is no cost whatsoever to Washington County and its residents. If we collect, then you pay a percentage. If you don't collect, we bear 100% of the losses and the cost affiliated with that. Mr. DeGarris has served in leadership roles. He served on steering committees as the co-director, as the co-chairman, in discovery of many different types of medical devices, and we've outlined his background there. My background is similar, but I haven't been in the leadership role. I've been representing, our firm has been representing clients in these various class actions or multi-district litigations for Invocana. We've got hips and knee replacements, different things along the medical profiles that go along there. We've also been on the front lines here in Washington County, Bay County, and surrounding counties. We have successfully sued doctors, bill mills, and clinics and received compensation on behalf of families. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to share all that information with you. Many of it was done under a confidentiality agreement. But we are currently, there is one that is public that we're chasing down a pill mill in South Florida, where a local resident, and we were able to receive a verdict in that case, and we're chasing them down to get the money. The federal government has stepped in that case and collected all of the funds, and we're making the application there, hopefully that we can get some compensation for the family. We've been here, we've been on the front lines, we're actively involved in Washington County, we're actively involved throughout the corridor between here and the Alabama state line. We've included our resumes, our background, so that you can read that at your leisure. There are multiple areas that you can go. I outlined the area of damages. Clerk of court, the county administrator, we will be working closely with them in getting the documentation that we need for damages. Unfortunately, they're pass-through damages. They're damages that you pay for in the services that you have, and then hopefully you get a recovery in the future. And so what's going on right now is individual counties, municipalities, sometimes individual law enforcement agencies are filing individual lawsuits. Their claims are for negligence, their claims are for nuisance, public nuisance, and also violation of federal statutes. And there's two federal statutes in particular that we'll be suing under. One of them is the Prescription Drug Act of 1970, and the second is RICO, because there has been collusion among the manufacturers and the distributors in having this problem. This isn't something that occurred overnight. This isn't something that's going to go away with just a waiver of the magic wand. You can start with the law enforcement, but there's three components to it. You've got law enforcement, social services, and then the individual as well. We're well educated in this area. We have represented folks in the past, and we humbly come before you to seek out the representation for Washington County. And I appreciate your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the meeting as well.
Board, do you have any questions?
I don't have any. I mean, this is something that's new to us and we're educated in.
Yes, sir.
It's very interesting.
What I included, or what we included in the presentation is it starts with the medical examiners. Unfortunately, our district, everything goes to Panama City, but it's a cost to the counties. And the overdose prescriptions just in our area, virtually if you see somebody under the age of 50, 1 in 2 of the autopsies that are being performed as a result of opioid addiction and overdose. I mean, so that's a staggering number for our area. And we are at ground zero in this area. We included the heat map from the Department of Health in the presentation, which shows that Holmes, Bay, Washington, as far as per capita population is concerned, it's the highest rate. Palm Beach County, the reason why we included that little news article in there about that, they're spending $1 million on the problem in addition. Washington County, Florida, with your smaller budget, has committed $750,000 just in 2017 to help law enforcement and combat these issues. So it's going to take somebody that is willing to advance the money, willing to advance the cost, willing to stay through the process, which may take 4 or 5 years before it's all over with. There is a multi-district litigation panel that is being formed. It's been recommended. It'll be in the district court, the United States District Court in Cincinnati. The judge has already been selected. And so what will happen is we will file the lawsuits. Everything will go up to Cincinnati. Somebody like Mr. DeGarris would be on the steering committee, and there'll be a large volume of lawyers involved with that. It may be 10, 15, 20 lawyers. And then, as the case progresses, a damage matrix is put together, and you can decide whether or not to accept the damage matrix, or there might be an opportunity later on to opt out and pursue your case individually. Either way, we're committed to help Washington County.
I know our governor has put a lot of emphasis on this opioid problem, the amount of money that it's creating.
We appreciate it, and I think what the board probably do is digest it individually. And is it okay if they reach out to you on an individual basis?
Yes, sir.
And then we can bring this back before the board in our January workshop and discuss it.
Okay. just, you mentioned the state of Florida. The state of Florida is expending more than $1.4 billion just in this right here. And that's, the last documents for that are 2015. And of course, we anticipate that will increase over the last 2 years.
May I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
You said something that kind of concerned me. How quickly does addiction occur through opioids compared to other things?
With opioid addiction, what we've now learned and why there's this panel that's being created and why these lawsuits are going forward, some of the research, the internal research documents from the pharmaceutical companies say that opioid addiction can actually change the chemical makeup of the brain within 14 days. And so if you go in and you got a hurt knee and the doctor gives you, it's not just one prescription typically that the doctor gives you. The doctor gives you something for pain, typically Lortab or oxycodone, something like that. Then the doctor prescribes an anti-inflammatory, which also files in the FDA Class II narcotic, which also is an opioid. And then, oh, well, you need to relax, you need to rest. There's usually something else in that same thing. So a 30-day supply, 4 times a day, you're talking 200-something pills that you've been prescribed now by the doctor. All legal, all there you go. But unfortunately, there's a physiological addiction that takes place. There's a lot of folks that this takes place. They're not out there to get high. Law enforcement is out there to get the guys and the girls who are out there running it, trying to sell it. People who then become so physiologically addicted to it that they're crushing it, snorting it, ingesting it, and then, I saw Randy step out, but you want to know why your EMS is increasing? Yeah, we're going to take a look at that as well. It's a large number. And you're taxing that with 2 staff ambulances here. And then you've got law enforcement. Down in Bay County, law enforcement has undergone additional basic life safety courses and has negotiated with the manufacturer of Narcan and then set up a separate protocol for the administration of Narcan to stop or counteract when somebody's in an overdose situation. So this is something that's in the moment that you turn it off again, you turn off the spigot, it's still going to leak because of that physiological addiction. And that's why they see down in South Florida particularly, and now also in Bay County as well, people are turning to heroin. And they go to heroin because, well, now they can't get it from their doctors, or they can't get it from Pawpaw's doctors, because Pawpaw will go get the money, go get it, share some with whoever it may be. They can't get it anymore, and they turn to heroin because it's a cheaper method of getting it, and it produces a higher high. And in doing that, though, law enforcement has run across heroin laced with fentanyl, which is again an opiate to, quote, give you that out-of-body, out-of-mind experience. Well, heck yeah, they're sending you to heaven or hell when they do that, because that's where your overdose deaths occur.
And I think we've all seen it. We've all been touched by it indirectly with people that we know that's addicted to them. And a lot of times, as you say, the medical field is the one that's creating the addiction. They're allowing the addiction.
Yeah, let me share something personal with you. My brother, as a result of a car accident to start with, then an on-the-job injury, and then, for whatever reason, he thought he could do MMA. He ended up becoming addicted to Lortab, and he passed away. Not because of an overdose of trying to get high, but liver toxicity. It built up in his liver, and at 42 years old, he passed away, leaving behind a 13-year-old son. So, you're right, it touches everybody, and you see that, and it touches me personally. And, I just like to do that for you.
If it hasn't touched someone in this room, they feel blessed.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Right,
We appreciate it, Mr. Perry. I'm sure the board will be in contact with you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
We could hear from Cliff Higby and his council.
Good morning, good afternoon now, Commissioner. You all are stalwarts. Been to a lot of meetings. My name's Cliff Higby, and I'm from the law firm of Bryan Higby in Panama City. I've been trial counsel for the city of Panama City for in excess of 20 years. My longtime law partner, who I think, if this is Matt Fuqua here, I'm pretty sure he knows my longtime law partner, Rowlett Bryan, who was the city attorney for 42 years. Our firm's been in Panama City for 35 years. My father was a retired federal judge. The reason I'm here today is largely because of this map. And I don't know if you all have seen it, but it is the Center for Disease Control, most recently released data on opiate prescription use and abuse per county in the state of Florida. As your neighbor in Bay County, we have something in common. Washington County is the #1 prescription opioid county per capita in the state of Florida. Bay County is #2. The opiate prescription overdose death rate has increased 55% in a year and a half. Recently, I was approached by the law firm and their consortium of law firms that is leading the litigation on behalf of municipalities and counties throughout the United States. About 110 cases have been filed in the United States on this issue. This group of lawyers that approached me to talk to Panama City has filed over 80 of them. They are in active litigation and have been in active litigation for a year and a half. I know your lawyer, Jeff Carter. I've reached out to Mr. Fuqua regarding some of his other municipal clients. Today I have with me Peter Mouget from the Levin Papantonio firm in Pensacola. They were the pioneers in tobacco litigation for the state of Florida and throughout the United States. They are leading the charge in this litigation. This is not like BP. This is not like tobacco. This is boots on the ground trial lawyers, which is what I do. And because of that, I had absolutely zero reservation about recommending this team to my hometown, Panama City, and to Bay County. So I want you to hear from Mr. Mouget. He's actively involved. He stepped out during this meeting today and was on the line in a hearing in this litigation. They have 6 highly respected and very well-heeled law firms that they are working with, over 100 lawyers, over 200 support staff, and they have the resources, the skill, and the legal expertise to take on this job to help our communities. Similar to Mr. Perry, I'm here today to offer our assistance. We will educate you all you need, but go ahead, Peter, and thanks for coming and speaking to the commission.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time, especially appreciate the fact you all have been sitting up here for a few hours. And this is one of the most important issues facing our country. President Trump has called this a national health emergency. What I'd like to do, rather than telling you about who I am or who our team is at first, I'd like to tell you about what's going on, what the litigation is, and give you some updated numbers. I currently represent 150 cities and counties. We focused on the epicenter of the litigation. We filed some of the first cases in West Virginia over a year ago. West Virginia, Southern Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, all the way down through Appalachia, Alabama, Georgia, and the Panhandle of Florida. That is the worst, hardest hit area of the country, and that's where we have focused. This is about my 110th meeting since January, December, coming in front of boards, coming in front of cities, explaining what the issues were, and the dynamic and the dialogue has changed considerably since we started looking at this. We started coming in front of cities and counties at the end of last year, before this was in the national press like it is right now. It was personal to a few of us. We started looking at this, and the more we looked, and the resonating theme I've heard from the last 4 hours is do more with less. And the more I look at this, and the more I looked at the opiate issues, what I recognized was, in addition to the personal havoc it causes, it also causes financial havoc in our communities. We've heard it from the sheriff this morning, we've heard it from the EMS, and these exact same issues that you all are discussing are resonating throughout the country. The financial impact of this burden is being shifted onto our communities financially, and the companies are pocketing hundreds of billions of dollars. Let me tell you a little bit about the litigation, how it's proceeding, and what some of the cases and the theories and the defendants are. Let me start in 1970, the Controlled Substance Act, CSA. Congress gets a few things right once in a while. They made a couple decisions and said, Schedule II narcotics, some additional use, highly addictive, a couple of molecules off of prescription heroin. We cannot let demand drive supply. Demand being from the end users, pharmacies, doctors, and hospitals. We can't let that drive supply because of the highly addictive nature of opiates. This is 1970, so we're going to create a gatekeeper in the middle of the end users and the manufacturers. And those gatekeepers are called distributors. And don't let the name fool you. Distributors are licensed by the federal government, by the DEA specifically. There's 800 of them. It's dominated by 3 major players: McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal. They're all Fortune 50 companies. McKesson, for example, is Fortune 5, 15th largest in the world. Their CEO made $160 million in 2016. These are huge companies. Their role was clearly defined in 1970, and as opiates became more and more a problem through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, their roles and duties were added on to. But they were given these licenses, and they were charged with the duty to control the flow of opiates into our communities. They were charged with monitoring every single pill from the manufacturer to the pharmacies and hospitals. They were supposed to identify suspicious reports. They were supposed to report the suspicious reports or red flags to the DEA. They were supposed to halt any suspicious shipments or orders of interest, and they were supposed to investigate those before letting the pills go. Those were their duties. 1970, I'm going to fast forward you all the way to 2000, 2005, 2006. The DEA became increasingly frustrated with the distributors' lack of oversight and failure to act as a gatekeeper. A gentleman by the name of Renasisi from the DEA, I don't know who saw the 60 Minutes special a few weeks ago, but Renasisi was one of the primary whistleblowers that was on 60 Minutes and was featured in the Washington Post story. He sent out a series of letters, 2005, 2006, 2007, to the distributors, reminding them about what their duties were, laying it out in a series of letters. They began slapping the distributors with fines, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million. These were speeding tickets. These were just the cost of doing business. The distributors continued dumping the pills into our communities. At first, when I started looking at this, I thought this was just, they turned a blind eye. They had a conflict of interest. The more pills they dumped into our communities, the more money they made. And I'm going to walk you through in a minute why it's worse than that. As 2005, 2006 continued, they continued fining, continued increasing the pressure on the distributors. They failed to do their job. I'm going to fast forward you all the way into 2012, 2013. The West Virginia Attorney General was one of the first Attorney Generals in the country to go after the distributors. Every single pill that I told you that was tracked, the monitoring and reported to the DEA, it's kept in a database. It's called ARCOS, A-R-C-O-S. No one's seen the ARCOS database. It's kept by the DEA. The West Virginia AG was the first regulator to see the data, only West Virginia specific, and only for a period of 6 years, and only the summary data. What came out was that, and this is one of the paper in Charleston, the Charleston Gazette, the gentleman ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize for his investigative reporting. He intervened in the case, got the ARCOS data, and what was determined was 130 million pills per year were flowing into West Virginia in a state that has 1.8 million people. They looked at it for 6 years. It was 780 million pills in total. You heard your sheriff come in front of you before, say we can't arrest our way out of the problem? That's why. 180 million pills per year in West Virginia, in a state with 1.8 million people. Your numbers here in Washington County, our numbers in Escambia County, Bay County, Pensacola, Panhandle of Florida, all the way up through Appalachia into Ohio, the numbers are just as bad. Just as bad. That's why we continue to have the problem. The pills are being dumped into our communities. So the West Virginia AG ended up settling the cases, and I started in about 2015, 2016 against the distributors. I started looking at this case in 2016 on behalf of a couple requests. I don't do pharmacy litigation. I don't do pharma litigation. I'm a business lawyer. I represent hundreds and hundreds of cities and counties and have across the United States on various issues. Our firm's got a huge pharmaceutical department. I got asked to look at this from a city and county perspective. And right away, I'm a math guy. Right away, I looked at it and I thought, this is a huge problem. We're bearing the financial interests. the constituents, the taxpayers. And more than that, this is a math analysis with the distributors, meaning they were charged with monitoring the orders and they didn't do it. So when I first started looking at these cases, I ended up finding a couple of lawyers in West Virginia that had filed the first cases in the country. And since then, there was only 2 cases when I started looking at this at the end of 2016. Since then, we have now filed, I'm going to update Cliff's numbers just a little bit, there's about 180 cases in total filed. We have filed about 110 of those. Our group, 6 law firms. The litigation now has been consolidated in Cleveland in front of Judge Polster, and about 55-60% of the litigation is represented by our core group of law firms, which I'm going to walk you through in a minute. Now let me go back a little bit. We got 780 million pills in West Virginia. We have increasing pressure from the DEA, and the DEA ended up fining Cardinal, AmerisourceBergen, and McKesson, the 3 primary defendants on the distributor side, almost $300 million late last year. We still have problems. As the crest of opiates have started to kind of hit the top and come down, prescription opiates, as we started to shut down the pill mills, what's happened? You've seen your heroin and fentanyl numbers spike. They're perfectly inversely correlated if you drop them out, meaning as prescription opiates went up, heroin went down. Now that we've seen the crest of opiates, prescription opiates, and started to come down a little bit, now you're seeing a pop in heroin and fentanyl. When I first started looking at this, first thing I did is I went to our police department, I went to our sheriff department over in Pensacola, and I said, tell me what's going on. I couldn't believe that we had in our small little town, we had a task force assigned to do nothing besides prescription opiates, heroin, and fentanyl. The investigators were so scared of fentanyl that they were going into anything that was suspected there was fentanyl there with hazmat suits on, because they're scared of inhaling it, ingesting it, or breathing it in the air, or touching it, because you're having overdose deaths just from inhaling fentanyl. That's how toxic it is. So the more we looked at this, and the more we started preaching this message and coming in with these descriptions of what's going on, the more fired up I get. The more I see that if you take pills per capita, you take deaths per capita, and you chart it out on top of earnings per share from these companies, they're all on the same line, the same trajectory, meaning they're all on a straight shot upward. Let me go all the way now to this summer, July of 17, August of 2017. At this point, we had begun filing cases. I had 30, 40, 50 on file. The DEA fined Mallinckrodt. Mallinckrodt is a manufacturer out of St. Louis, small. They fined them 35, 40 million bucks. But here's what was extremely telling from the investigation. There was what they called a chargeback scheme. And the chargeback scheme was that the Mallinckrodt was paying the distributors. So you have a manufacturer paying the gatekeeper in the middle for their information about who they're selling to, pill mills, pharmacies, and hospitals. So they told the gatekeeper, the guy that's supposed to be the beat cop, that's licensed by the federal government, they said, if you tell us where you're selling, we're going to give you a discount. I call that a kickback. Now the RICO claim that was mentioned earlier, we brought the first RICO claim. And I brought the RICO claim because we said this is a conspiracy between the manufacturers and the distributors to conspire to find those areas that are hardest hit, which is why communities from the Panhandle all the way up to southern Florida, if you look at the CDC map, they're all bright red. The hardest socioeconomic areas in the country are where the problems are, and that's where they targeted. So we added a RICO or a conspiracy claim to our complaints and added the manufacturers in. Now, why did we add all the manufacturers in? If anybody saw that 60-minute special, the DEA, 2 of the DEA diversion, former DEA diversion guys on 60 Minutes are our exclusive experts. So when the Mallinckrodt order came out, we took that back to the DEA guys and we said, hey, tell us about this. Tell us, what is a chargeback? And they said, this is prevalent in the industry. It's common practice. The manufacturers are all paying the distributors for the information. We added in the manufacturers on that RICO or conspiracy claim. We've also added the manufacturers in on the marketing claim, the Purdue, the OxyContin, the understating the risks, those types of claims. Those have been out there for a while. We added in the manufacturers on the marketing claim as well. So all these cases have now been consolidated into Cleveland in front of Judge Polster. And today was the first hearing. Actually, that's why I was in the hallway. Today was the first hearing. It was at 12 o'clock as a update on the organizational structure in front of Judge Polster. So at the end of the day, you have two sets of damages. One, and the easier one to kind of grasp, is the retrospective damages, meaning the EMS, the first responders, the Narcan, the overcrowded jails, the impact of the kids born with NAS, which is addicted to opiates. Those are all retrospective damages. We can define those, we can work with you, we're already working, capturing those across the country. But what gets me fired up and gets me up in the morning, 5:30 this morning to drive over here, is the prospective damages. Like I said, I've represented hundreds and hundreds of cities and counties across the country. One theme is consistent everywhere I go. No one has money for anything. How are we going to clean up this mess? These pills are addictive like no other we've ever seen. Heroin's addictive like nothing else we've ever seen. How in the world are our counties here in the Panhandle of Florida going to be able to afford to clean up the mess? And we all know the answer, we can't. So what I believe the driving policy behind this litigation is to shift the cost of cleaning up the mess, hence the public nuisance claim. We were also one of the first to bring the public nuisance claim in this context. We are taking that responsibility and putting it on the defendants. You've caused the problem. You are the ones that have that let these millions of pills flow into our communities. You're the one in Washington County, 172 prescriptions per 100 people in Washington County in 2013. That's 1.72 per one person. And that's not adult, that's man, woman, and child. And that's not a pill, that's a prescription. So whether that's 5, whether that's 10, whether that's 20, remains to be seen. 1.72 per person, man, woman, and child in Washington County in 2013, according to the CDC. So our goal is to take and shift the responsibility for cleaning up the mess. In technical terms, under a public nuisance statute, it's called abatement. We are going to shift that claim back on the defendants and make them clean up the mess. So how are we going to do that? Right when I started, the first thing I did is I sat down in Huntington, West Virginia, in a conference room in a law firm there. It's my co-counsel, Paul Farrell, and I sat down with representatives from Marshall University, the president of the university, the head of the pharmacy school, the head of the medical school, and the head of their addiction services and their county health administrator. And we said, we want to turn this on its head. I don't want to go and ask for damages retrospectively. I need you all to tell us, what is it going to take to clean up the mess? So we've been working on a model for over a year of having them tell us, what infrastructure do you need? What beds do you need? How do we take care of the kids that are born with NAS or addicted to opiates? And once we get them off of opiates, how are we going to track and monitor them as they proceed through elementary and middle school with behavioral problems? How are we going to handle on the police side with keeping us safe? How are we going to handle the education side? How are we going to tell kids that the pills in mom and dad's medicine cabinet are just as dangerous as the pills you find on the street or the drugs you find on the street? So that forward-looking, the prospective damage model in conjunction with the retrospective or the backwards damage model is absolutely key to this process. So what we would like to do is we'd like to help. I'd like to give you a light at the end of the tunnel. I'd like to give you an answer to some of the problems. I'm having the same conversation in my hometown, which is humbling and also very intimidating. I understand the burden and the responsibility, I think, is the best word that puts on me, representing our community. My wife and her family are from Panama City. Panhandle to me is home. How do we do this? How do we clean up the mess? I put together 6 law firms to work on this. Here's my theory. I'm going to come in front of you if you hire us. I'm going to come in front of you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now. We're going to have a conversation about settlement or trial. Do we settle or do we try? As these cases, I started to get retained, I got a little worried that even though I'm with Levin, Papantonio, and Pensacola, which is one of the country's largest plaintiffs firms, we got about 40, 50 plaintiffs lawyers, 200 support staff, am I going to be able to handle the size and scope of this? I saw where this was going. So rather than gather cases, just me, keep all the case, What I did was I said, I see this growing, and I see it growing big, and I'm a little worried about my ability to be able to fund it, and I'm a little worried about my ability to be able to manpower it. So I went and got some of the country's largest plaintiffs firms. Barron & Budd's another one based out of Dallas. They're about the same size as us. And then I got several smaller boutique trial firms that were intimately familiar with the opiate epidemic, and we formed a cohesive group. At first it was 5 firms. We needed a little more research and a little more writing bandwidth, so I added a firm that specialized in research and drafting. There's 6 firms. I'm going to give you a some of those have a couple of coffee stains on them. Drinking coffee, some more over here. These are the right one, though. I can show you right now. I put together 6 firms. Everything I told you just now, the first several pages of that booklet is a legal memorandum that puts everything I just told you in about several page memorandum. I give you the key documents, settlement documents with the big major 3 players. I gave you the settlement document with the DEA with Mallinckrodt. I gave you the manual from the trade organization that the big 3 sits on the board of directors, and they outline their own scope of responsibilities. You don't have to listen to Peter Mouget tell you what the responsibilities are. They lay them out in their own trade manual. I also, at the end, gave you the bios and of our firm and the group of firms I put together, and then the key lawyers are in the mix of it. Let me just close with this, and I hate this part because I hate kind of tooting our own horn, so to speak, but let me just kind of tell you who we are, and I'm going to give you an example of what we've done. This year, we settled a series of 3,500 cases in Southern Ohio and West Virginia. My firm did, along with several other firms. It was an environmental case. It was against DuPont, obviously one of the world's largest companies. DuPont put $50 million on the table to settle 3,500 cases. We said no. So when I told you earlier about coming back in front of you 5, 6, 7 years from now and telling you settle or try, you want a firm or a group of firms that have the bandwidth to go do it, because sitting in the back of the lawyer's mind the whole time is always, can I really afford to go spend $3 or $4 million trying a case? It's a little nerve-wracking. Can I really put this much time? The risk is huge when we go to do this stuff. We think the project costs in this thing are going to be $40, $50 million in total. So in DuPont, we went and told our 3,500 clients $50 million wasn't enough. We turned it down. Court got a little frustrated, as courts usually do when they have 3,500 cases sitting in front of them. They were consolidated in one. The courts put 40 cases in 50 weeks on the docket. And he said, you're going to try 40 cases. Anybody who practices law in federal court, 40 cases in a short amount of time is a ton of work. We had a similar structure with law firms. As a matter of fact, a couple of the firms that are in the book were with us in that case, and that's why we put them together. We developed trial teams, and we spread them out. We tried 1 case. We tried 2 cases. We tried 3 cases. In the middle of the 4th case, the project settled for $920 million. Every project we got, every case verdict we got was 7 and 8 figures. In the middle of the 4th case, DuPont ended up paying $920 million. There were settlements going on in the middle of the 4th case. That's what it's going to take to bring this in. We were one of the 4 co-lead firms in BP. We were on the executive committee over in New Orleans. This isn't BP. We think these cases are going to get tried. We think there's going to be a lot of them that get tried. And we've created a team now that is cohesive and is going to be ready to try these cases. Not Peter Mouget coming over and saying, if these get tried, I'll add firms later. We're built to try cases now. We'd like to help. Anything I can answer going forward, please let me know. I'm not that far away. I'd be more than happy to come back down again, as I'm sure any of us would. We all have the best intentions. We all want to make sure that we can really implement change in our communities and hold the right people accountable. Thank you for your time.
We sure appreciate it. Is there a contact in here for, who do we need to contact?
Either Cliff or I, yes, sir. We can get a hold of Jeff.
Okay, well, Jeff will get contacts to us, and each one of the board members go review it. We'll review it on our own time, and we'll be in contact for the next workshop, and we'll come back and work.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.